1969. The next year we had a surplus was fiscal year 1998. And then we had surpluses for 4 years, 98, 99, 2000, 2001. Then we had deficits again. And now the deficits are getting relatively large, at least in dollar terms. They're still not as big as some of the ones we've had in the past. But $400 billion is a fair amount of money. And there's no reason to believe, under any credible set of assumptions, that they're just going to go away on their own. So whoever inherits the White House is going to inherit this deficit problem. And we don't necessarily have a consensus on sort of what the goal is. There used to be kind of a bipartisan budget consensus that we wanted to balance the budget, and then we did. And then that consensus sort of went away, and now we have deficits again, and we don't necessarily have a consensus. And then we have long-term budget challenges related to Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, which are really just sort of ticking time bombs in the budget. And since I'm at CBO, I have to show you the really scary CBO chart here, which basically shows that this on the left is what's actually occurred. And you can see that these programs have been growing. This dark blue program is Social Security. The light blue program is Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare and Medicaid didn't exist back here. But then if you project out, and this goes all the way to 2082, when some of you may still be living, but I will not be, when you go out all the way out to 2082, what you can see is that Social Security grows sort of a little bit, but Medicare and Medicaid grow substantially, so that if everything else stayed the same and Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid grew as they're projected to, the total federal spending would go from 20% of GDP to 35% of GDP. And the federal budget has never been 35% of GDP. It's never even been 25% of GDP. So the likelihood of this being allowed to happen is not that great. If it did happen, we either have to raise taxes up to that point, and taxes have never been more than about 25% of GDP, or we'd have to go into debt in order to finance the difference, which would be a really large debt. Now here's the trick. We know how to solve the Social Security problem. We choose not to, but we know how to solve it. We don't know how to solve the problem of Medicare and Medicaid because it's not just related to demographics, it's related to medical care inflation. And we don't know how to control medical care inflation, not for the federal government and not in the overall economy. So this is a big problem, and it's a big problem that we don't have a solution to. Consequently, since I'm sitting in CBO, my understanding is that every single person who is hired by CBO is told, you need to solve the healthcare crisis, because solving the healthcare problem is obviously sort of a big factor in terms of solving the long-term deficit problem. So we have the short-term deficit problem, and then we have this sort of big, scary long-term problem, which the next time you hear somebody making substantive suggestions in the presidential campaign about how to solve that big long-term problem, you please let me know, because it will be the first time that I've heard it happen. Okay, second set of problems are what I would call process and politics problems. The first one being late appropriations. We have chronically late appropriations between fiscal year 1976, which was the first year of the Congressional Budget Act, and fiscal year 2007. Only 4 of 32 years saw all appropriation bills passed and signed on time. Actually, should have included fiscal year 2008 so we could make it 33 years because they didn't pass in 2008 either. And so continuing resolutions, which are sort of short-term appropriations that they pass when they don't pass the real ones, and omnibus appropriations, which is where they put all the appropriation bills together into one big bill, have become business as usual. And late appropriations are not a good thing. Late appropriations are not a good thing for a whole number of reasons, including the fact that they're very bad from an agency perspective because agencies sort of can't plan their expenditures. Imagine putting together, for example, your fiscal year 2009 budget when you don't know how much you have in fiscal year 2008 yet, which is routinely the kind of thing that happens. Then there's this thing called the budget resolution, which the Congress is supposed to pass by April 15th, which it almost never passes by April 15th, but it normally would get around to passing it eventually, except that in 4 of the last 9 fiscal years, the Congress didn't pass a budget resolution at all. And so that's a bad thing. And it's a bad thing because this is supposed to be where the Congress articulates its vision for the budget compared to what the President's vision is, and it hasn't done a very good job of that. There's also this process called reconciliation, which in the 1990s was a process